Hello, I'm Matilda Butler, welcoming Linda Joy Myers to Women's Memoirs. Hi,
Hi,
Linda
Matilda.
Joy.
Hi, Matilda.
Although I'm sure that our regulars know you from previous interviews, I'd like to introduce you to our new followers. Linda Joy Myers is the award winning author of the memoir Don't Call Me Mother, and two books on writing memoir. The first is The Power of Memoir: How to Write Your Healing Story, and released earlier this year is her new workbook called Journey of Memoir: The Three Stages of Memoir Writing. And of course, Linda Joy is the founder of the National Association of Memoir Writing.
Mm.
Although there are many topics that we could cover today, we're talking with Linda Joy about the second edition of her memoir. Linda Joy, thanks for joining me.
It's wonderful to be with you again, Matilda. Thank you for having me come.
Uh, As you know, I've been a real fan of your memoir, Don't Call Me Mother: Breaking the Chain of Mother Daughter Abandonment. And when I read it, I felt that you had taken a really deep and honest look at your life to better understand it and had shared it with your readers. I thought, and perhaps you did too, that you were telling the whole story. Yet now you've released a second edition in which you tell more, in which you go even deeper into your story. And I noticed that you changed the subtitle from Breaking the Chain of Mother Daughter Abandonment to A Daughter's Journey from Abandonment to Forgiveness. The new subtitle definitely points to a different direction for your story. Could you tell us, the when and the why
Mhm.
that you decided to write this second edition of your memoir?
Right, right. Yes. Well, for a while after writing "Don't Call Me Mother," the first edition, I felt that I had done everything I could to present my life and the story as it appeared to me. And I had spent many years writing it. So, it's sort of like raising a child. You end up changing and growing along with your book. And so when I finished it, I was done. And then I shared it around a lot, and that was really great. But there's some kind of dark parts to the story that have to do with mental illness and the abandonment chapter particularly, and some abuse. I'm not a fan of just overdoing details on that, but still they're there and they're part of the true story. And so some people said, "Gosh, your book sounds too dark for me. I don't want to
Mm.
read it."
Oh, really?
And yeah, and I said, but it's a story about forgiveness. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, they don't know that.
Mm-hmm.
So it
Mm-hmm.
happened enough. That's one piece of why I changed it. It happened enough that I went,
Mm-hmm.
well, how would they know? I mean, we always are learning new things about marketing and
Mm-hmm.
tagging our titles and focusing. I mean, these are things that all writers have
Mm-hmm.
to work with. And so I ended up working with it those years in between doing this again. And then there were some other things that we'll end up talking about, I'm sure, but some things that happened in my life and in my reflection on the whole story. Things that had more resolution, more answers, and even a deeper resolution with me and my own daughter. And this is a generational story about daughters who are broken from their mothers in some form or another. How I wanted to break the chain, but you can intend to change a family pattern all you want, and you don't quite know what will happen. I mean, it isn't just up to us, it's up to other people, and it's an ongoing growth situation. So I really was inspired to show that it was a real blessing to have certain things happen. And then the other reason I brought it out new, though, is that I may be answering one of your other questions ahead of time, but is that there's a whole world now that hadn't read that book. And we have social media, we have new ways of sharing. None of this existed when I brought out the first edition.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Good. Good. I I know that you you worked on this and you've just brought it out. It's just now available. Um, About, and I'm sure you had to do some research. I know you did on your first one. Did you do some research? And so, how did that fit into the timelines of getting this, the additional material into it and then getting it out? So, can you tell us a little bit about the research for this?
Well, now we can call it research looking back, but when I was doing some of these things, I didn't think of it that way. It was more like there was unfinished business that I was handling. And so part of what happened, and you know some of this story, but I decided in 2000, what year was it? Early in the 2000s to go to my high school reunion. And but the thing that had dogged me throughout all these years is chapter 2 of my book is about living with a family that was abusive and bullying to me, particularly the children and the mother. And though it was very healing to write that story, and not everything that happened is completely included in gory detail, but you get the idea of a 5-year-old girl living with his family and being kind of on her own and frightened and so on. And so the truth of it is that this had always haunted me, and I was still dreaming about these people. And so finally, and afraid, the mother was a very scary person and very cruel. But what I did, I'm one of these people that if you give me a mystery, I am like a dog with a bone. I will turn the world upside down to get answers. So I realized, I thought, well, are these people still alive? Where are they? So, and this was before the internet was where it is now. So I called the reference librarian in the town that they lived in and asked for the phone directory, and they were listed in the phone directory with a phone number. I did not call, these are the children, I did not call, these were male children, I did not call them. I was like, oh my gosh, they're alive and they're there. Oh, now what do I do? And I didn't do anything for several years. But I started to feel like a coward. I'm like, come on, can't you just call them and I don't know, maybe they remember you, et cetera, et cetera. So I set myself up for a choice. I was going to go to my high school reunion. I landed in Kansas City and was going to rent a car and drive through the wheat fields of Kansas and Oklahoma because I wrote about them in my book, and I wanted to know if they were the way I remembered. So that, I guess that counts as research also. I tell you, that was an ecstatic experience. So, because it was so beautiful. There's so many beautiful things about the Midwest. And as you know, I do write about it, but it was so great. I hadn't been for so long to the late spring in the Midwest. I didn't know if I wrote about it accurately. I sort of wondered. I had my doubts, So then I had a choice to go left on one road and get on down to Oklahoma, or go forward and get to this town, which I rename Wheatland in the book, where these people live. And I was shaking. I pulled off the freeway. I was shaking one of those old cell phones, the kind that the little guys, Yes. And I called the younger son's number because he was the nicest person to me in that family. And I said my name and who I was related to and who he was related to, because the family was a first cousin, so he'd be a second cousin or something. And he remembered. He said, "I don't quite remember you, but you come on by." But my mother did take in lots of children, so come on by. So. Oh my God. So I drive over, and he's a perfectly lovely middle-aged man. And but the brother I was most afraid of was the older brother. And he says, "I called my older brother and he's coming over." At one point I'm like, oh my God, what have I done? But this old man, I last saw this older brother when he was 12. He was wearing a straw hat. He looked like he was coming out of Petticoat Junction. I mean, he was this great character guy with a big handlebar mustache and big blue eyes. And he looked me right in the face. He says, "Linda Joy, I've been wanting to see you." And I was shocked. I'm like, what does he remember? What does he know? So to try to make a long story slightly shorter, I spent the evening in the living room with these people. And what happened was astonishing, and I write about this, and that is that there is a moment when I realized this older brother needs me to forgive him. And because he keeps bringing some things up, he keeps looking at me, it was more of a subtle thing. And I stood up and put my arms around him and I said, I forgive you. And there were other parts to the story that I include in the writing of it. But, oddly enough, and I didn't even think of this when I did the subtitle at first, but it's subconscious, no doubt, this is one of the forgiveness stories.
Yes.
It isn't just about forgiving my mother. And so that and other things that happened in the family, there's some, I don't know if you're going to ask me about what I left out and why. Is that part of another question?
Well, let's take that right now.
Okay. So another part of the story that I left out was more facts or more detail about another cousin, this is in Iowa, who was abusive, not violently so or anything, but kept trying to feel me up for years, kept trying to seduce me, and so on and so on. And what finally happened in this Iowa family that I'd held to be my family, because I didn't have my mother, I didn't have my father, my grandmother had died, and I kept going to Iowa and I now realize it was a fantasy family to a degree. Yes, they were related, but they didn't love me. And I couldn't bear to know that until something finally happened at a visit where I got it. And I can't say that I wasn't warned by my therapist for many years. He had warned me. He just was saying, you have a fantasy of these people, and that's not who they are. And I'm like, oh, yes, they are, And I say this because I think that many people writing memoir have inside them various versions of the story that they're trying to tell. And maybe the story you write at first, where I did leave some of these things out, I did it to preserve this family that I held on to in Iowa, because I felt strongly that if I said more, I would lose them.
Right.
And
And you needed the family. You needed them as family.
Still inside me and my psychic construction as support system. And finally, the story is about the moment when I realized a lot of things, and I put it in. And it's not written as revenge. It's written as, you know what, I couldn't bear to say all of my truth in the first edition. This is what happened later, and here it is, and this is why I did it. And it was hard to admit, I have to say. So,
right.
I'm glad I did.
Yeah, I like the way that you talked about unfinished business, because actually at the moment of finishing a memoir, we really don't want to go back. I mean, it's been a lot of work and usually a great deal of time, and who wants to try it then? But I wondered if you could tell us, based on your experiences with this second edition, what advice do you give to memoir writers? Is it that you can go ahead and write your story as best as you can at a particular time, and go ahead then and either distribute it or seek publication of it, because believing that what you're saying is honest and true, or should you kind of let it hang around for a while and then try to think back, are there other things that you didn't reveal, and is it now time, should you wait for it? What do you do with this story, this life that we put together on paper? What kind of advice would you give?
Well, if we wait for everything to be resolved, we'll probably die before it all happens, and we won't have a book, or we'll be so old we can't even figure out how to type anymore. So, but I mean, the thing of it is that what I notice with memoir writers, and maybe you do too, there are all kinds of reasons we want to wait to publish it. We're afraid, it's like taking your clothes off in front of everybody, really, to write a memoir, even if if it isn't, I mean, no matter what you're revealing something, and a lot of things, really. I mean, I took a long time to publish it in the first place for all the reasons that everybody would hesitate. And finally, I just started to kick myself and say, just get the heck out into the world with this thing,
Right.
and quit worrying. I mean, and so I think it's a fraught thing to go over that threshold into publishing for some people. I mean, I'm not an extrovert. I wasn't trying to be on a reality TV show. I mean, it was an effort to reveal. It wasn't just easy. And I know this is true for a lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of people. I just say, figure out where you're going to end the book, because your life is going to go on.
Yes.
You can now, especially now, you could write the next section of your story as a Kindle single and sell it immediately. I mean, once it's edited, of course. There are so many ways now to handle this, and I could have done that too, but I wanted a new edition. I wanted a new publisher. I wanted the whole book, and so I did add the afterword to the book, and I changed a few things in the book, but several things. But write it, get it out, get what you can out, and really work with your writing coach or your editor or something to help you not stall at that threshold.
Okay. I think that's very good advice. So what you're really getting to here is another point that I think is quite interesting for a writer to consider, and that is writing two separate memoirs versus expanding on or adding to the first memoir you do. And those are two different ways to go, and probably under quite different circumstances. But if someone is thinking about their story, it might be helpful to consider that. What advice do you have, or which way do you go depending on what you want to accomplish?
Either way is valid, of course. But I mean, I had considered re-editing completely and completely rewriting Don't Call Me Mother, and I have a writing coach who said, don't you dare do that. Because I'm a little, I get a little OCD about the thing, and I'd already done it, and I had to go, you have done that story, what else do you have to add? And the only real new information is in the afterword, though I have a new edition, and there's other parts that I did change some, but I didn't do it would have taken me 2 years, and I've already done that story. Yeah. If I'm going to do another one, I'll do one maybe about my father or some other angle of the story. The other thing, other authors are doing both things that we're talking about. So Mary Carr and Frank McCourt and many other memoirists are writing more than one memoir. They're doing a chronological set or series or something, and there's lots of people really doing that. I can't even think of all the ones, and not all of them are the most famous authors. Just lots of people are doing it. So if you have more to say and more that comes later, or you can go out or you can go down, but it's new material. Right. If you have a book that needs to be brought back into life, I noticed that Robin Hemley, who has appeared on NAMW for us on the Telesummit and a wonderful presenter, he's brought out his memoir, Nola, again, and he calls it a re-release. And I haven't had a chance to talk to him yet about why, but I did write him a note and say, why were you bringing it out in a new edition? Did you just get a new publisher? Did you add new material, or what did you do? And I'll post something when I find out the answer. But I think if you have a new insight and you just want to create a new edition, that's what people are doing. And also people get new publishers. Yes. as you have done, and recreate something.
Yes, and Kendra and I did something that's a little bit more similar to what you were doing. Rather than another slice of life or a different point of view on it, Kendra and I, in our new edition, our second edition of Rosies Daughters, realized that it had been, in essence, 10 years since we'd interviewed the women. The women at that point were turning 60 and had a particular perspective on their lives. And I realized, jeepers, 10 years later, they're all entering their 70s. And what is this generation of women talking about, looking forward to? What do they want to do with their lives? But it wasn't a whole new book.
Right.
And so we added that as a new chapter, sort of similar to
Oh, did you?
your concept.
Good.
And we put those there, did more interviews, and went out, and then put in some of their stories and looked at really what their attitudes were about their 70s, and were amazed. So wasn't exactly what we expected, but really amazed by it. So I agree. In that case, there wasn't. It didn't stand on its own. I don't think we could have done it as a single. It wasn't. It didn't really stand on its own.
It fits with the book.
That's right.
Yeah.
It needed the rest of the perspective of the book.
Right.
So I can
hard.
understand that. Yeah. Yeah. In some cases, one is appropriate versus another. So, well, I'm really excited that you have this new edition out. I think there must have been times for you that this was pretty difficult to go back into this and.
Well, you know what? It was actually a relief. It was
Good.
really a relief. It was a relief to say more. I think I got braver because, since I wrote Don't Call Me Mother, I wrote The Power of Memoir, and I've been out in the world teaching. I started National Association of Memoir Writers after I published the memoir and before I did Power of Memoir. But, as you know, you're a teacher. I mean, I think that the living in the bubbling in the soup of memoir writing, I mean, it shifts you. You get easier with certain things, and I try to learn from others' teachings and my own. Sometimes I'm teaching somebody something, and I go, "Oh, that applies to me too," And so I felt more courageous. I felt stronger, and I kind of didn't care what people said about it. I mean, it was an easier thing to do, but I kind of grew up with the book, so like I was saying.
Oh, well, that's really great. And so will you tell our readers how they can get a copy of the second edition of Don't Call Me Mother?
Right. Well, it's available as an ebook in whatever format you need to download, and it's, of course, on Amazon. And it's available, and you can order it. It's available at bookstores as well. It's easily available. And I would like to let people know that I'm writing a lot about mothers and motherhood, particularly this week. Thank you, Matilda, for having me this week on the Huffington Post 50 blog site. I have a post that's gotten a lot of comments about forgiveness and Mother's Day, and also the plight of the undermothered to find the right Hallmark card. And I found many sisters in the comments on this site, and I think so many people feel alone and like, is there anyone like me? Which is part of why I wrote Don't Call Me Mother. I looked for books to help me, and there weren't any. And I was hoping that my book could be a book that would say, if you lost your mother somehow, not just through death, because Hope Edelman covers that topic beautifully, but in some bizarre way where you have this weird ambivalent relationship. You don't, it's neither fish nor fowl, as they say. You don't know what to do. And so there's some people out there, if there's others watching this, that are struggling with that. And so some of them are showing up on that blog.
Great. All right, great. Well, thank you, Linda Joy Myers. I'm sure your insights will be valuable to our readers. And thank all of you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Matilda. You're a wonderful hostess.
Goodbye.
Bye.